Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we're going to paint a lovely vase of sweet peas, but the most exciting thing is we're going to do some homegrown ones because I have actually managed for the first time in my life to grow some flowers, not just sweet peas but flowers full stop. I'm really not that green fingered. So this is my lovely sweet pea plant. It's been a bit of a roller coaster of emotion getting it to this point, but all of a sudden we've got some gorgeous flowers. Crumble, shush. But I don't know if you know, I'm sure you do know, but just in case, when your sweet peas start to flower, it's really important to actually start cutting them. Whoops, that didn't go very well. It's important to start cutting them as they flower to encourage more flowers to come afterwards. And what's brilliant is I've been doing this for a few days and we've got a lovely vase full already. So grab your paints and let's get started. Before we begin, we're just going to have a little look at some of these flowers, and it's also a general appreciation moment for my ability to grow some flowers. But if we have a look at these lovely sweet pea flowers, we can see that there's a few different petals going on here, and actually the colourful one's probably easier to show. So you've got at the back a sort of, this is called the standard petal. Then you've got two either side, and these are called wings, wing petals. And then just down in the middle there, you've got the keel petal. So as it unfurls, you can see them a bit more clearly. Two wings, standard at the back, and the keel. And so sweet peas have five petals and 5 sepals, and these lovely little ridged stems coming downwards. So we're going to have a lovely time painting these very delicate translucent petals, perfect for watercolour. So let's get a piece of paper in. I've got a 6x8 inch piece and we're going to do a little bit of drawing first. So I'll begin by sort of finding the rough central line of my page and drawing in my vase, which is a jug today, and it's a little bit sort of tapered out, so it's a bit broader at the bottom, and do a stem, not a stem, a curve. I'm a little bit distracted by a few tiny weeny flies in the vicinity, and then we'll do a nice rounded top. So I'm looking down on this vase so I can see into it quite a lot. So there's quite a round shape there. And I will just extend this a little bit to create that. So if I do this and that, there's this pesky fly, and I'm trying to carry on without it bothering me. And now we'll have a little. So we've got a lip on one side, we need a handle, just a little one here. And we can give that a bit more sort of interest and detail by just remembering that if we've got a bit of height here, we're probably going to see a little bit of height in there as well. Okay, so it's just a case of adding that extra little bit at the top. Now for the sweet peas, I want to, well, this is a solid sort of ceramic vase, but we need to think about how our stems are sort of coming in and out of the vase. So you can either just imagine trailing the pencil and then start to draw a stem. I want to really capture this sort of kind of chaos coming out of my vase. I mean, it's so wonderful having the real thing, but also you don't need to have the real thing if you don't happen to be growing any flowers of your own at the moment. That's the beauty of this, is we're just learning a new technique. But the characteristic of sweet pea stems is they're that little bit sort of, they're nice and stiff and short, but they do curve over and curl over whenever there's a flower growing, and also when there's a new bud coming, they really curl over. So we can add in some of those as well. Now, often when I'm drawing vases of flowers, we put in a few stems to sort of get the general feel, but we don't necessarily have them all drawn in. We'll add in extra flowers here or there, which might mean later on we add in a stem. But we are going to begin our painting with the flowers because they are the main event, and they're also very delicate, so it would be difficult to paint in, say, our vase fully in first and then try and put any flowers that were sort of tumbling over the edge in. And depending on the angle of the flower, so obviously we've got these 3 different layers. If we were painting it like that, we'd see this one much more than the others. If we're painting it like that, we see this one much more than the others. So there's going to be not one size fits all for this, but we'll be loose and fluid and see how we go. So I've woken up Imperial Purple, Permanent Rose, Opera Rose, Alizarin Crimson, and actually I think a little bit of buff titanium is going to be quite useful to make a base colour. Now the base colour, I mean, is a sort of pale, I would say white in inverted commas, colour that's going to help us just create those really, really pale translucent petals that we can drop in colour to. But this is very creamy at the moment. I just want to cool it down a fraction. So I'll get a little bit, and when I say a little bit, I mean that's too much. There we go. That's just, the Paynes Grey there has just knocked it back a fraction, made it a little bit cooler and made it a really good colour for the base petal. But also, when you look closely at a sweet pea petal, you're going to inevitably see a little bit of greeny yellow creeping in, because from the green from the stem, the petal will have a little bit of yellow in it. But we can play around with this. Now, I've got my size 8 brush here, and I'm going to begin by painting in some lovely, large, loose, standard petals. Now that was the big one at the back. And I'm going to begin by taking my pale white colour, and it's going to be very difficult to see this, but I'm creating a sort of balloon-like shape. And now I'm going to take some Opera Rose, if I can even see it, and I'm going to just drop that in around the edge of the petal there. But the key thing is there tends to be a slightly more pronounced streak of colour up the centre of the standard petal. So let's do another one, and I promise I will get a slightly stronger colour in next, but I'm making this nice sort of balloon-like shape. Opera Rose again, around the edge, and so I'm capturing the wetness of the petal and also just edging it so it hits the dry page on the outside, meaning we get this lovely crisp edge, but it blooms into the middle, and then just like that. Let's try a slightly stronger colour. So I've got my little base here, but I'm going to introduce in a little bit of Permanent Rose as the base. So even the pale petal, the standard petal to begin with, is a bit more colourful. And this time I'll take some slightly more concentrated Permanent Rose, and I will edge, oh look at that, lovely, edge the colour, and I can always send that colour down. Now we're using the water quite liberally here, and with a lot of tutorials I'd be saying, oh, that's maybe a little bit too much water, it's puddling on the page a bit much. But the beauty of painting sweet peas is I feel that maybe a slightly sort of not too strict technique is quite good, because it provides you with amazing and quite erratic blends just like the way the colour floods across a sweet pea petal. I'm going to paint in one or two across the front of my vase, so they might not always have this nice sort of open feel. We might sort of see half the standard petals, so and I see the colour sort of coming up the back like that. But let's do one of these lovely deeper sort of claret coloured ones with a bit of purple in them. So I've got Alizarin Crimson and Imperial Purple. So we'll start off with a dilute Imperial Purple colour. Because remember, we're going to be building up layers of these petals, so we don't want to go too strong too soon. So Alizarin Crimson around the edge. I think the other reason that I'm encouraging you to use a bit more water than you might have done in previous projects is because it's a hot day today. I mean, if you're painting sweet peas seasonally, they're going to be in summer, and the paper is going to dry the paint quite a lot faster. So we're just going to sort of fill in a range of standard petals of our sweet peas. At the moment I'm keeping them all separate, but please do go for a little bit of an overlap if you want. So let's try one of those now. Just take a bit of a base colour here. So for example, I'll go for one just here. And I might take a bit of a different colour. I think that's quite fun. So we're just going to build up this page. It can be very easy to get excited and fill the whole page, but remember we do have the wing petals and keel petals to add in. So I am going to now take these same colours but just use them in a tiny bit more concentrated value. But when I say that, I really do mean a tiny bit more concentrated. So they are all dry, they look really gorgeous and crisp and really like sweet peas, which is what's so exciting about this project. If I take this one here and if I get a little example, this is probably quite good. So we can see, oh, look at that match, wow. We can see our standard petal at the back, we can see the wing petals here and that one, and the keel petal in particular has got a little bit of yellow in it, but we're focusing on the wings right now. Now I do appreciate it's not going to be quite easy to get a white petal on top of one of these, but what we can do is we can create a pale colour that's got just that little hint of the shadow in it, and just sort of you can create the feeling of a white petal, even if it's not actually white, just in terms of what it's contrasting with. Now, when I put this on, it's going to be wet, it's not really going to show up very much at all, but it's in the drying because you can see how these very pale ones have crisped up, look really, really gorgeous. So I'm going to paint this on and you'll be like, that doesn't look anything, that doesn't look right, but trust me, it'll dry. Right, size 4 brush, I'm going to paint on 2 wing petals, and I'm going to continue to paint in nice sort of delicate little pale petals, and they are going to probably sort of take on different shapes, different sort of openness or closed, and also a lot of them still do have some colour in them, so if you wanted you could still get a little bit of colour on there. And of course our Imperial Purple ones are going to have a nice sort of strong bit of colour about them. But you see, we're glazing, everybody. Remember that from last week? I do seem to get a technique into my brain and use it an awful lot. That's looking really lovely, and if I pull out the purple one here, you can see the difference of the colour. We've got the claret on the back and the purple there, and that's looking really nice. You could always add a little bit more purple into them if you want. And then we have ones that are sort of slightly more closed. We might be seeing sort of the top of the back of the standard petal, and therefore, oh, don't stick your hand in it, Harriet. Maybe, just maybe, for some of them we see something like that. Once those have dried, it's time for the keel petal. So you can see those first ones I did, so pale, but they dry and crisp up really beautifully. So finally for the keel petal, it's again going to be a case of just changing up your mix one more time, and you might want to, you can see here there's a bit of sort of texture of pattern with the keel petals, so you could always paint it like that. Let me explain what I mean. I've got a smaller 2/10 brush here, and that's nice and dry, and I could do something a little bit more like this rather than just a sort of dilute sweep. And I will put in a tiny bit of green gold in the base there. Now some of these ones we might not see the keel petal, but for ones like this we absolutely will. So I'm going to take a bit of my mix and try not to, like me, fall into the habit of mixing up your colours with a tiny brush because it takes forever. So we've got buff titanium in there. It has got a little bit of pink, that's fine, but I am going to wake up the cadmium yellow as well as the green gold. So again, it looks like it's going to disappear into oblivion, but I get a tiny bit of yellow in there, tiny bit of green, and even the tiniest bit of pink, and you just let that dry, and like with all the other ones, it crisps up and creates a beautiful fine line edge that makes it look like you've gone around everything with a very delicate fine line brush, but in fact you've just been a bit clever with your transparent watercolour. So if I try just doing a sweep of colour on that one, and I think you could just also make it stand out by just adding in a bit of a different colour like that, because the Alizarin Crimson was on the back petal, on the standard petal, but not on the wings there. Now this is where I want to have a little bit of fun. I've got the rigger brush out because we're going to do the stems, and I've got green gold, and I really do think green gold is the perfect colour for these stems, at least initially. So I want to really capture that spindly, slightly wobbly and wild stem of the sweet pea. And so I am going to just sort of send my brush up and down, in and out, and just see where the flowers are going to capture it. Now obviously we've got a lot that are overlapping on one another, but that doesn't mean to say you can't put a stem over the top. And don't worry if it's not 100% dry yet, because I think it sort of adds to a lot of the character of the piece. I like that. Now there are quite a lot of flowers on my various stems that have multiple flowers. So if you feel like you want to just add in any last extra little sort of splashes of colour, sort of here, there and anywhere, now is the time to do it. I don't think there are many, but I just suddenly thought it could be quite fun for the sake of the composition. Just those little single brush strokes, I think that's rather nice. It's just good to create that sense of abundance in your vase. But it's easier almost to add them now, once you've sort of painted in your stems and things. Okay, I like that. So we're going to let this whole thing dry now, and we're going to start to think about the vase, and then just a little bit of extra detail in the sepals and little bits, highlights on the stems. I've got Cobalt Turquoise here, and I'm interested in making it a bit more muted. I mean, just by diluting it down, you're going to get a paler colour. But if I add a tiny bit of burnt sienna, it just knocks it back quite dramatically, actually. But I do rather like that, but I want to get a bit more of the blue in there. That's quite a green turquoise. So if I just get a bit of cobalt blue deep, I'm now turning it into a bit more of a sort of sagey aquamarine kind of colour, and that's rather nice. So we do have to be careful, obviously, going around our sweet peas. So I'm going to begin by doing that just with I'll start with a size 4 brush. I'll probably feel in a minute like I need a bit more control. But my colour is very diluted. And also, if you do end up with a bit of overlap, it's absolutely fine, because we're painting in such a lovely pale way that it's going to be able to be rectified. Working quite quickly to make sure that the paint doesn't dry and create a hard edge. Okay, lovely. So now I can paint a bit more freely, and I can use a larger brush, which is good. And the vase, the jug does have a sort of ridged texture around the outside, like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to achieve that through the next layer we put on whilst it's still wet. So we're going to just strengthen the concentration of this colour a little bit. I find the brown really interesting when it mixes in, really makes it quite nice. Okay, I'm going to take a size 2 brush, and on the wet, but you can see it's drying. That's okay though. And then down the edge. Just do that little sort of wobbly edge, and then just sort of soften it in. You're not going to see a huge amount from this side, but just getting that slightly darker colour in there is great. So I'm down to my size 2 and my 2/10 brush. I'm sort of interchanging to start to do the sort of slightly more complicated bits of the jug. So I just on the side did a little sweep of colour and again started lightest and then built it up. And now once that's dried, I'll get in a separate little bit. And just by doing those bits separately and allowing them to dry gives them that definition without necessarily doing too much extra depth of colour. But what I am going to do now is I've got some Paynes Grey and I just want to introduce a little bit of that in to the colour. Just in there. And then on the interior of the vase, again, we start lightest and I'm going to paint around. And the great thing about this is because we're starting nice and light, we can paint sort of over the stems. We want to paint around the petals, but because the stems are greeny blue and the vase is greeny blue, it all works okay, just as long as you're doing it with not too many brush strokes. And I'm going to come down to the base here and then, whilst this is still wet, get in some Paynes Grey. Come down to the base. So at this point I'm now sort of loosely painting around the stems because we're going to go back and do a little bit more on those. But yeah, that's looking really nice. So let that dry, and this is the point where we'd rub out the pencil entirely. I bet you forgot there was even pencil on there, but you can see it. We're not even going to see the lip of the jug actually with this. So let it dry, rub out the pencil, and when I say rub out the pencil, you want a hard eraser, something like this Factis Ink 30, or the other rubbers I love using are the ones in my Essential Watercolour kit, the Koh-i-Noor ink eraser as well. The difference being that the kneadable eraser is great for reducing harsh pencil, but it not getting rid of it entirely. This stuff gets rid of it entirely. So the pencil's all rubbed out, and what's amazing is some of these lines I keep on going, oh, is that a pencil line? No, that is just the beauty of translucent watercolour. Okay, so we're going to now just create a little bit more of these sepals and the stem. So I've got sap green as well as green gold, just with my 2/10 brush, and I think it's a mixture of somewhere between the two of them because I don't want it to be too harsh. And we won't see sepals all the time, but we will from time to time. So and because we've painted our flowers nice and dilute, it means we don't have to paint particularly heavily on on top if we are layering over the top. I think also have a bit of fun with this. Don't be too sort of neat and tidy with your sepals. Because the very nature of sweet peas, I think they want to be a little bit sort of wild and a little chaotic. But you might not always see the full sepals, so you don't have to paint in every single one. Yeah, I'm just sort of looking over it and seeing what I can see. And then a bit of deep sap green just here and there on some of these stems. That could maybe do with a little sweep of something to just define them a little bit more. We're going to finish off with a tiny bit of shadow, and now we know that that is called glazing with shadow because we use a nice dilute colour. But what I want to talk to you about is the different colours we might use. So I just mixed up the Paynes Grey and the vase colour in together, which is going to be a great colour. But I want to add the tiniest bit of shadow onto the sweet peas, and I want to make sure it's the right kind of colour. And I realise that Moonglow has got this sort of slightly more purpley feel to it, and I think it'll be a really good colour to give a little bit of shadow to some of these flowers. But let's begin with the vase itself. So I've got a size 4 brush because I just want that little bit more control. If I think about, well, I'm going to probably place in some shadow sort of underneath the flowers on the top of the vase. I'm trying to get that sense of the sort of multiple petals coming down, so I might just sort of soften it as well as it comes down. That's quite nice. And you know, we have got stems and things as well, so it's not all just about big blobs, is it? About little delicate bits as well. A little bit extra on the underside and round the bottom, but again, just I want to soften that a little bit. I like that, and then I will take a slightly more concentrated bit to add just in a moment. We'll let that dry first though. For the petals, it's just a little bit here and there I think would be rather nice. Sort of these lower ones really, and it gives them just a little bit more sort of interest. A little bit more texture and shape. You can really see how this starts to bring pieces to life. And of course helps things look like they are all there together on the page in relation to one another, not just lots of floating flowers. Okay, so this has had a little bit more time. I just want to add in bit more shadow. That's still a bit wet. And there we go. I think that is done, but maybe, just maybe, a little bit along the table. But of course we have our lovely sweet peas, so the shadow is not so much about just a sweep of the jug, it's also about those stems. And then we just take a little bit of a stronger colour right underneath. And there we have our lovely vase of sweet peas. And here's the real thing. Haha. So thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that one. I absolutely loved it, and the smell of the flowers whilst I've been painting has just been gorgeous. If you want to paint tons more pictures like this, just make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We've got loads of flowers and foliage tutorials, lots of vases of flowers, flowers on their own, flowers in gardens. I like flowers. So don't forget to like and comment, let me know how you got on with that one, and I'll see you again next time. Bye!